Good afternoon, Mr. Ahmed here. This note-taking section is really revolving around how we solve a quadratic equation by factoring. The notes correlate with the Big Ideas assignment 7.5, so I am going to write Big Ideas 7.5 assignment right there. Big Ideas 7.5 assignment. Now we are going to use our skills from factoring that we just practiced in our review. Keep in mind we have 5 methods. Always look for the greatest common factor first. If there's a GCF, we want to pull it out. If the TLC is equal to 1, that means it starts with just a simple x squared, I don't know, plus 3x minus 4. Let's go with that. So that would be an example when the TLC is equal to 1, just an x squared. If the TLC is greater than 1, we will have to use the AC method. And that's when there's a coefficient in front of the x squared, so it looks something like 3x squared plus 6x minus 8, something like that. Then we have our perfect square trinomials. That's when we're going to see perfect squares. So an example of a perfect square trinomial would be something like 4x squared. That would be our first term, and let's say our last term was 9. So we could take the square root of 4x squared and the square root of 9, and we'd look for that middle term. That would be double those two. So that would be an example of a perfect square trinomial. So if you see perfect squares in the beginning and the end, that's probably what we're going to have to use. And finally, the difference of two perfect squares. That's when we'd see something like 49y squared minus 64. Both perfect squares with a minus sign in between. Set up the two parentheses, one with a plus, other with a minus. Okay? Now, our goal today is to solve the quadratics. And in order for us to solve it, we are going to set the equation equal to 0 and use the zero product property. As we know, 0 times anything is always equal to 0. Okay, so if we get the equation into a factored format and one of those factors is 0, then we would know what the solution will be. So zero product property states if AB is equal to 0, then A or B must be 0, because 0 times anything is equal to 0. So what we're going to do is we are going to make sure that our equation is equal to 0. So it has to say equals 0. All right. After that, we're going to factor it using our steps, and then we're going to apply the zero product property. So really the best way for us to do this is to hop into some examples and see how it works. So our first example says 4x squared plus 2x equals 0. First thing we have to check, does the equation say equals 0? Yes, it does. All right, step 1 is complete. Now, factor it. So we're going to use our process. Is there a GCF? Yes, indeed there is. GCF is 2x, so we're going to factor out the greatest common factor. When I take the 2x out, I'm dividing both terms by 2x. 4 over 2 is 2, left with 2x on the inside. 2x divided by 2x is plus 1 equals 0. So these parentheses mean that it is being multiplied. All right, so we have two solutions to the quadratic. As we saw when we graphed, a lot of times it crosses the x-axis at 2 spots, and the x-axis is when y is equal to 0. So that's why it's called a 0 as well. So when I look at this, my two factors, I have 2 of them. The first factor is 2x. It's outside the parentheses, so if 2x is equal to 0, then the equation is true. The other factor is 2x plus 1. So if 2x plus 1 is equal to 0, it is also true. We have to solve both of these to find our solutions. To solve it, divide 2, divide 2. X is equal to 0 over 2 is 0. So one of our solutions is x equals 0. The next one, 2x plus 1 also has to equal 0. So I have to solve this. Subtract 1 from both sides to isolate the x. 2x equals negative 1, and then we divide both sides by 2. Negative 1 over 2 is negative 1/2, so our second solution is x equals negative 1 over 2. We have found both solutions. So really what we're looking at here, we have it in factored forms. This is like a times b. So if this first factor, 2x, is equal to 0, it is true. So we're thinking to ourselves, what times 2 is 0? 0 times 2 is 0. Now the next one's much less obvious. It's another factor, 2x plus 1. If that's 0, this whole value inside the parentheses, that also will make it equal to 0. So we have to say 2x plus 1 equals 0 and figure out what value of x makes this whole set of parentheses equal to 0. So kind of a long process here. It does require a little bit of practice, but if we can factor, solving the equations are pretty straightforward. So on to our next example. We'll get a little bit of a more straightforward result on this one. Now, in this case, x squared minus 9x plus 18. First step, is the equation equal to 0? Yes, it is. Now we factor. In this problem, TLC is 1. There's not a GCF to pull out, so we're going to use TLC equals 1 and set up our two sets of parentheses equals 0. So we're looking for factors of the last term, 18, that add up to negative 9. The last term's positive. That means the signs have to be the same. Middle term's negative. So I have an x, both minus. So factors of 18. Let's see, what do we got? We got 9 and 2. 9, 2, I can't get that out from negative 9. Those are out. 6 times 3. But that's plus 6. That adds up to positive 9, so they both need to be negative. Negative 6, negative 3. We have it factored. Now our two factors this time is the two sets of parentheses. X minus 6 is one of the factors. X minus 3 is the other. So we have to figure out what value of x makes x minus 6 equal to 0. So it's not negative 6. The solution is not negative 6. That is not correct. X minus 6 has to equal 0. When we solve that, we add 6 to both sides, so x is equal to 6. 6 minus 6 is 0. The value of x that makes it 0 is 6. The other factor is x minus 3 for our other solution. When is x minus 3 equal to 0? Add 3, add 3. That is when x is equal to 3. So our two solutions are 6 and 3. Now for the u-tries. What I recommend that you do is pause the video, give this a shot, and if you get stuck, turn the video back on to kind of see what the process is for each one of the u-tries. All right, so first one of the u-tries. X squared minus 2x plus 1 equals 0. TLC is equal to 1, so I'm setting up my two sets of parentheses. Factors of 1 that add up to negative 2. Negative 1 and negative 1. So I'd have x minus 1 equals 0. Now the two solutions. Well, that's actually x minus 1 squared. But x minus 1 equals 0, add 1. X is equal to 1. And the other one, when's x minus 1 equal to 0? Add 1, x is also equal to 1. So there's only one solution for this one, and that is x equals 1. Next problem. Is it equal to 0? It is not. So if it's not equal to 0, I have to move the negative 4 over to the other side. So my first step is to add 4 to both sides. That way the equation says equals 0. So I'm going to actually slide this one over so I have a little bit more space. 2x squared plus 6x plus 4 equals 0. We added the 4. All right, is there a GCF? Yes, there is. Taking out a 2. When I take out a 2, left with x squared plus 3x plus 2 equals 0. Now I can factor the trinomial. The leading coefficient is 1. Set up the two sets of parentheses. Our 2 is still there. Now that's not going to be a solution because it's just 2. I can't make 2 equal to 0. Factor. X, factors of 2 that add up to 3. our plus 2 and plus 1. Now our two solutions for us to solve. X plus 2 has to equal 0, and x plus 1 also has to equal 0. Subtract the 2, x is equal to negative 2. Subtract the 1, x is equal to negative 1. And we have found our two solutions. Okay? Our next one of the U-tries, like we said, if you want, you could look at the completed notes for the answers for these. That's an option as well. But maybe a good pause here in the video for you to give it a shot. And then if you get stuck, you could take a look. So the first thing, well, I think I see perfect squares. 4 is a perfect square, 9 is a perfect square. Square root of 4x squared is 2x. Square root of 9 is 3. 2 times, oh, that'll add up when we double it. So set up my one set of parentheses. Now, in this case, 2x, the middle term's negative, so it has to be a minus 3 squared equals 0. So there's only one solution to this, and that's when 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. So we would say 2x minus 3 equals 0. Add our 3. 2x equals 3, divide 2, and x is equal to 3 over 2. So if you notice that it's a perfect square, that's definitely going to simplify the process, okay? Last one. This is the hardest type. Hardest type. AC method. TLC is greater than 1, so use AC method. So we have to multiply a times c. 2 times 3 is 6. We're looking for factors of 6 that add up to 7. That is 6 and 1. Okay? Rewrite the middle term. 2x squared plus 6x plus 1x plus 3 equals 0. GCF on the first two is 2x. Left hand side is x plus 3. GCF of the second one's just 1 plus 1. Left hand side, x plus 3 equals 0. Rewrite 2x plus 1, both the numbers outside, times x plus 3 equals 0. Now our two solutions. We have to solve the two equations. When's 2x plus 1 equal to 0? And when is x plus 3 equal to 0? In order to solve, subtract 3, x is equal to negative 3. Here we have two steps, subtract 1, 2x equals negative 1. Now I'm going to have to slide this over. When you divide, x is equal to negative 1 over 2. So that is the toughest type. We will have 2 days to work on these, all right? So make sure you take your time. These are going to require some practice, might need some extra assistance. If you do, make sure to reach out, set up a hangout. Have a great rest of the day.